All right, now let's see how we can update a course. So let's add a new route handler. App. We use the put method for updating resources. Now the path should be /API/courses. And here we need a route parameter because we're dealing with a specific course. So ID. Now our route handler function, request and response, goes to a code block. All right, now here's the logic we need to implement. First, we need to look up this course with this given ID. So look up the course. If the course doesn't exist, if not existing, we need to return 404. That means resource not found. Otherwise, we need to validate the course, make sure it's in good shape. If invalid, we need to return a 400 error, which means bad request. And if we get here, that means everything is good. So we update the course and return the updated course to the client. This is the logic we need to implement. So we already have some code that we can reuse here. So I'm not going to type everything by hand. I'm going to copy some code from our other route handlers. So first we want to look up the course, and if it doesn't exist, we want to return a 404 error. For that, I'm going to go to this other route handler where we get a single course. This is the logic we're interested in. So we look up the course, and if it doesn't exist, we return a 404 error. So copy these two lines. We're done with the first part. The second part is all about validation. For that, I'm going to go to our post endpoint. So here we need to copy the schema as well as this line for validating the request body using Joy. Now, there is a problem with this approach. The problem is, in this case, we have a very simple schema. What if you were dealing with a complex object with quite a few properties? Then our validation logic would be duplicated in two different route handlers. So let's just copy the code for now, and then we'll come back and refactor it to make it better. So copy these few lines and paste it here. So we're validating, and if it's invalid, we need to return a 400 error. So I forgot to copy that line here. If you have an error in the result, we're going to return this 400 error, okay? So let's copy that as well. So this is our second part. We have the schema, we validate, and if we have an error, we return a 400 error. We're done with the second part. Now the third part. So at this point, we have a course object. We can update its properties. So course.name, we set that to request, .body, .name. And of course, if we have other properties, we'll set them here as well. So we're done with updating the course. And finally, we need to return the updated course to the client. So response, .send course. This is how we handle an HTTP put request. Now, I told you that we have duplicated this validation logic. So I'm going to extract these few lines into a separate function that we can reuse both in this route handler for handling our HTTP put requests, as well as the other one we wrote in the last lecture for creating a course. So let's define a function here and call it validate course. We give it a course object. Now in this function, we should have the schema as well as this line for validating the course. So cut these few lines, paste it here. Now instead of validating request.body, we're going to validate the argument that is passed to this method. So that would be the course object. And finally, we can simply return this result to the caller. There's no need to define a constant. So with this new implementation, we have all the validation logic in one place. Now we can reuse this. So here's our put method. We define a constant called result and set it to validate course. And as an argument, we pass request dot body. Now we can make this code a little bit cleaner and shorter by using object destructuring feature in modern JavaScript. So look here, we get this result object and we're accessing result.error property in two different places. Since all we're interested in is this error property, we can get this using object destructuring. So let me duplicate this line and show you how object destructuring works. With object destructuring, when declaring a variable or a constant, we add curly braces, and then here we add the property of the target object. So in this case, the target object that is returned from our validate course method has two properties, error and value. In this case, we just want the error property. So we put that between curly braces. So this is equivalent to getting result.error. But instead of using this notation, we use this notation, okay? And with this, we don't have to repeat result.error in two different places. We can simply use error. Okay, so this is object destructuring. Now we don't need this first line anymore. And finally, before we finish this lecture, we need to make one more change in this code. So we need to use this new way of validating a course in the route handler for handling our HTTP post requests. So copy. This is our handler for creating a new course. Now we don't need to use the schema here. We moved all that logic to our validate course function. So all these few lines here for validating the request body and sending the 400 error, I'm going to delete this and paste the code that we copied from the other method. So we call validate course, use object destructuring syntax, and if you have an error, we return the 400 response to the client. Now finally, let's test our new endpoint for updating a course. So back in Postman, we need to change the type of this HTTP request to put, change the URL and add a valid course ID, like one. Here we have a valid course object with name set to new course. So send, and we get a 200 response, which is successful. And here's the updated course. So if you open a new tab and send an HTTP GET request to localhost/API/courses, now you should see the list of our courses. So our first course, its name is updated. Perfect. Now let's test the other scenarios. What if we send an invalid ID? So 10, send the course with the given ID was not found. And you can see the response is 404, which means not found. And finally, what if we send a valid course ID, but an invalid course object? So I'm going to remove the name property. Send. Now you can see we have a bad request or 400 error. And here's the error message. Name is required. Next, I'm going to show you how to handle HTTP delete requests.